Good evening, and we'll call to order the school board work session of, what is the date? March 11th, 2019. Sarah, would you please call the roll?
Aldrich.
Here.
Christensen.
Here.
McKeon.
Here.
Peterson. Here. Tomzig.
Here.
Tucker. Here. And Bowerman.
Yes, ma'am. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So tonight, we're going to kick off with a good news item, but I actually have something I want to say about this good news item. It is a proclamation recognizing the Paraprofessional Recognition Week. Normally, I've been told that that is held in May. And so we had it on our calendar, and we were all prepared to recognize that group. And come to find out, we were notified that the governor, I guess the governor, if I'm right, Sarah, decided to move it up. Maybe as a former educator, he wanted to move it a little earlier in the year. And so it got moved. So it's actually already been held. It was the 3rd to the 9th, so it was last week. We didn't have a meeting to hold this, so we're kind of doing this in arrears, but we certainly wanted to recognize this very, very important group. But it's not from lack of interest. We had it on the calendar and then found out it got moved. So I'm going to read the proclamation. Bear with me for just a second. This is to recognize all our paraprofessionals out there. Whereas Minnesota is home to more than 28,000 paraprofessionals who provide service in multiple settings in the schools, including support for instruction, for student activities, and for individual students, as well as numerous other tasks that contribute to educational success. And whereas the support and services provided by paraprofessionals are integral to student achievement, resulting in even better, more effective Minnesota schools, and whereas the state of Minnesota and the NDE are committed to excellence in education and recognize the important role that paraprofessionals play in ensuring educational success, and whereas the MDE will recognize the contributions of paraprofessionals during Paraprofessional Recognition Week, which runs from March 3rd to March 9th, 2019. So we are just a little behind, but again, it's not from lack of interest or appreciation for what they do in our schools each and every day. So we want to recognize that group, thank them, and tell them how much we appreciate everything they do. So again, our apologies that we aren't doing it in advance, so we can pat them on the back and kind of doing it afterwards, but that's why. So shout out to that group.
Absolutely.
Anyone care to add anything? No?
As someone who taught before there was such a thing as a paraprofessional, I can tell you that they are very valued in the school. So,
All right, we will move on to item number 4, consideration of agenda as presented, and I have one schedule or order change. We're going to move 7.1 up to the next item after we accept the agenda. So is there anything else on the agenda we need to address? Okay. I'll look for a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
it's moved.
With the amendment or the change. Okay, second? Second. Joe? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. So we will move 7.1 up. Dale, and is it just me, Dale? Are you going to do it with Dale, or are you going to do it with Dale?
We're going to kind of let Dale take the lead,
Dale,
and then
run
we'll
with it.
pitch in. Dale's been incredibly helpful in this whole calendar
A
process.
few calendar items.
Yeah, so you already have an approved calendar for 1920, and there are some suggested changes that we're presenting here tonight, hoping for your approval. So you have 2 documents in your book. One is a kind of a narrative that goes over the changes, and the other is the actual visual calendar, I guess you could say. The key thing is I guess just looking at the narrative, the first item is the impact of the high school going to a traditional 4x4 block means that we really need as much as possible at balanced quarters. You might ask, looking at the revision, the first quarter has 45 and then the others have 42. That doesn't sound balanced. The issue is that if you're going to do a truly fully balanced calendar, we're going to have midweek end of quarter breaks, and that seemed like that was probably not ideal to do like a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday kind of a quarter break. And looking at comparative districts around that use a traditional block schedule, majority of them are using this kind of a calendar for next year in terms of trying to find the balance. Normally, if you have extra days, you'd want to put them in the first quarter anyway, because there are some startup issues that the beginning of every year that it helps to have a little extra time there. So if you look, the approved calendar had, if you look in the first column under current calendar, You'll see quarter one had 45, quarter two had 43, quarter three had 41, and quarter four had 42. So it's not a big shift here. We're basically shifting one day from quarter two into quarter three, basically to get balanced 42, 42, 42 for the remainder of the year. So that's that in terms of that. And so you can see that it changes the end of quarter two from January 24 to January 23. And changes the beginning of quarter three from January 28 to January 27. The second piece that's related to the 4x4 traditional block is that you really probably need to eliminate the senior early out, because if we're truly doing balanced quarters for the purpose of making sure that every class has an equal opportunity to have their full curriculum accomplished, it's pretty hard to give away 4 days at the end of the school year so that seniors, coming back, it ends up being 8 days of, curriculum under the old system. It would have been about similar to that. So, we would be recommending that you don't have seniors getting here early. So that's the first change. Any questions on that?
They can't even get on a day early?
That's for you guys to decide. But if we're, again, the purpose of balancing the quarters is trying to make sure that every class now is quarter length. So if you have, one class that's getting the equivalent of multiple extra days to do their curriculum, it feels like there's a lack of fairness there in terms of being able to get your curriculum just because you happen to teach in the wrong quarter.
Other question? I have one, Dale, and I may be totally wrong, but I thought one of the reasons why seniors were let out early was in relation to graduation, getting grades in and making sure that different credit. Is that going to pose any issue with it kind of running up to the end?
So it's a good question. It's the way it was done, obviously, before that. So
Yeah.
they survived it. It certainly did help that process, especially for counselors and others who were pulling all that data together. And so it was a benefit to them to have it the other way. It's not that it hasn't been done this way in the past. And so here it's kind of weighing two different good things that kind of against each other on the one hand. And I guess, coming from my perspective, I think that having that kind of equalized class time for that fourth quarter, for those fourth quarter classrooms probably trumps the nicety of having more time to pull together. That's personal opinion.
Although it could be pretty serious if things are not done in a thoughtful manner, having the time to do it, if grades don't get in or kids who are supposed to graduate don't.
It certainly creates more pressure on that, getting it turned around. And there's no way to, I don't know that there's any way to say that that's not a concern.
So bringing this tonight, help me with kind of how this was vetted. Like who's, what I'm trying to avoid is we get to June 3rd and it's like, how did this happen? And, what was me kind of a thing.
So the process that we use is it's, obviously it's the district and the school board's responsibility to set the calendar. You have the right to do all of that. I've always tried to make sure from our side that all of our contract days are, covered and so on and so forth, and then to try and provide input in terms of what, sometimes teacher preference is, or different concerns that have come up through the different processes we've run, like doing the 4-period day thing.
Right.
You even raised the balanced quarter thing, I think, last year when we were originally talking about this, so, which is a really important thing, because I hadn't been thinking about that. So that was very, very, very helpful. So normally the process is that about the same time of every year, usually probably the first time we do it is maybe early January.
Right.
Where we kind of look through just to see what naturally falls out on the calendar. We always do surveying on our side just to kind of get an idea if this is available, what are your interests? You still want a week-long spring break, just to get what teacher input is. And then I usually sit with the superintendent and with Sarah, and I think Dave was maybe involved a little bit this time. And we kind of talk through what are the impacts of different changes and so on and so forth. Did I go back and ask the counselors if they thought this was a good idea? No.
So So I guess what I'm trying to understand, is this going to come as a shock, a surprise, out of left field, or is it just, something we adapt to? Or do we know at this point?
I guess I don't know for sure. When we have made these changes in the past, typically there hasn't been a lot of, pushback. Normally when questions come up through the, as I'm going around, I don't necessarily send out, hey, here's all the changes that we're thinking to all the teachers, because everybody's got an opinion. And most of them there aren't really a whole lot of decisions to make on the calendar. It really drives itself because of all the parameters that are around it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to involve a ton of people, because basically you have to work to get them all back to the same place that you're starting from anyway. This is probably a more unique situation because it does affect a group of people who have what becomes a little bit more challenging job just to pull it together in a shorter amount of time. And to be frank, I didn't go back to them and talk to them about it. It felt like it was probably a decision that needed to be made above their pay grade, so to speak. In terms of that, I didn't even think it was probably my right to say that. So this was our conversation in terms of that, and we didn't necessarily specifically spend a lot of time talking about what the impact would be, because partially from my perspective, because we've done it that way in the past, and it's been doable. Now, we are bigger, but we also have a larger group of people that work on it as well. So to me, it didn't, again, maybe it's something we should have done. It's not something we did.
Okay.
I'd like to hear what the administration thinks about this.
I think it's been a good process. I think, Dave, you also brought it to the principals group for some feedback recently. The district leadership team weighed in. I don't think you talked about that with the early release days. I think this year we're
That's true.
all on Wednesdays at kind of just somewhat random times throughout the year, and part of the feedback from that group, I happened to be on that meeting and then see it brought to the calendar meeting. They had a good rationale for moving it near more natural breaks. They thought that would be for better professional learning on both of those days, that it made sense, so we're going to give that a shot.
I'd say beyond the counselors, a lot of people have had a chance to look at it, including high school admin, and there wasn't, it's possible somebody didn't look at it and think to that point. I'm trusting that they looked at it and thought that that was doable. I also wonder, and this is my own personal wondering, if I know I'm going to be in class till that time versus I know I'm going to be off for the 4 days, and I am someone who's pushing it right to the end, I'm in there and might have a chance to roll it anyway. And one other thing we did that I know I'll speak from the elementary is, you could say, if somebody's in trouble with a week left, they're already, or 2 weeks left, they're already on our radar anyway, or they should be.
And that was the past practice.
Yeah,
Is that
and so-
anybody who was in concern, they were informed. That was
Should be a surprise.
Yeah, it should not at all be a surprise.
But I think if our communication is good going up into that, I think we're okay. But I do also believe, Reggie, that some people are going to look at it and go, what happened? I believe that will. I do.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of change, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's all I wanted to clarify, because again, not having ever lived it as a teacher, or certainly as an administrator, to know what the hurdles are, I just remember that particular element about the early release was, it supported, it wasn't just a thank you and hey, you're moving on, it was, there's a practical component
Yeah.
too. And I just hope that, assuming we take action and follow the recommendation, that there are ways to do it. And I'm comforted by the fact we have historically, and that gives me more reassurance, but I just think it's good to recognize that.
Well, I do think it's
Call it out.
probably something that we, probably from the group, somebody needs to go back and make sure that and clarify that it is, people are aware,
Yeah.
so that it isn't something that they're discovering on, May 31st.
Right.
How long has that been going on for, early out?
That's a real That's a good question. One,
Was it Kim Swift, right?
Yeah, that seems about
so
right.
probably 6 or 7 years, maybe.
I say, I don't remember my daughter having it.
No, it was, I want to say 6, 7.
Yeah, and I'd say the biggest what happened is going to come from the current juniors.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, you can count on that.
Yeah.
They're lame duck.
And they can all vote in the next election.
Yeah, that's right.
They will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions on this part? I know there's more to talk about. Other questions on this? All right, want to keep going, Dale?
Yep, second thing is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The recommendation is that we would really like to strengthen the support of that particular national holiday by making it an off day. So basically what this just means is that we're moving around an off day, a full off day for staff. It's normally a staff development day, kids are off. And this is a way of, recognizing the value of what Martin Luther King Jr. Stood for. By doing that, we're truly celebrating it as a national holiday. So the day basically, you can see the, again, current calendar to revised calendar. Currently MLK Junior Day, no students, but it's Teacher PD Day, Friday, April 10th, no students, no teachers, that was the off day. Friday, May 1st was a student contact day, so what we're doing is we're rotating those 3 days. It's essentially what's happening, and so MLK Junior Day becomes the totally off day, no teachers, no students. Friday, April 10th becomes a student contact day, and Friday, May 1st becomes the no student teacher PD day.
Was it ever considered to make the teacher PD day on Friday, April 10th, so at least students would have off on Good Friday?
We did talk about that, and again, this is one of those things, I don't know if you want to speak to it, but there has been some conversation in the past with district leadership about avoiding religious holidays, particular religious holidays, because it does make it a little bit difficult then when you have Jewish members or you have Muslim members who are saying, hey, what about our religious holidays? So if you can pick a off day that's not directly tied to a religious holiday, it makes it a little easier to sell. Obviously, we have winter break that's built around Christmas and that kind of stuff, but again, references to those are all now winter break as opposed to in reference to the Christian holiday. Another advantage of doing this particular change is that it does kind of break up. Fourth quarter, there's literally no off days at all in fourth quarter, so this puts one kind of right in the middle, where there's just a chance for people to kind of step back a little bit rather than 8 straight weeks in a row. So that was kind of some of the rationale in terms of putting it where it is. It also, the other change that comes with this is because we have one extra PD day for the secondary levels, because the elementary levels are all putting in 8 extra hours of parent-teacher conference time just to get the way they do parent-teacher conference, it makes sense to do. So the E5 teachers would not be in attendance on this particular day. This would be a secondary only PD day. That was February 15th this year, but we would move it to the last day of the year.
Comments or questions?
I like that because I do remember, as you said, that 8 weeks between April 1st and Memorial Day when it was
Stretch, yeah.
every day for 7 weeks, and to have one day off is just kind of nice. So I think that's a good idea.
Another question, Dale,
Yeah.
and again, just pardon my naivete, but we're moving a PD day that had been earlier, but like halfway through the year, it's at the end of the year. Do you get the benefit of the PD if it's towards the end of the year?
Yeah, so it can be used in a variety of different ways. One of the advantages that we have right now is because we have the early release PD time that's built in.
Right.
That helps significantly in terms of the ongoing PD. What ends up happening in these kinds of cases, it creates an opportunity for reflection as well as preparation for the next year as you're moving in. So whether that's through PLC work or other kinds of things. And then there are other things that don't require a particular time of the year for it to be effective. A good example would be the equity work that the district is moving towards and so on and so forth. Any time is good time for those, some of those kinds of things. So I don't think that necessarily has to be a barrier. I think all things were equal and it fit well into the calendar to do it earlier. I think that would be everybody's preference, really would. But in this case, all the other trade-offs, in terms of trying to do balancing creates, every change you make creates a different set of issues. So this felt like it was the best of the trade-offs.
Well, and as you know, every calendar year gives you different puzzle pieces.
Right.
I mean,
One last thing too, and he referenced it, and I just realized in our vetting of this, we didn't talk about, was we did actually shift the early release dates. So the previous calendar had all the, and I don't know why I didn't put it in the narrative, it just never even, I knew we had already agreed to it, and somehow I forgot to put it on here.
I was trying to make it look like it was part of our presentation. That was my part.
Yeah, that was your part, sorry. But they were all on Wednesdays, spaced out throughout the calendar, and you can see that the first one got moved from the 25th to the 26th, so just one day, but that was to line up all the other ones on Thursdays. This came through the district BLT, which is representatives from all the building BLTs come to the district. A number of teachers brought to that, through that process, hey, it would be great to put those early release days on the last day of school. The secondary level, that's finals week anyway, so doing a shorter day on that particular day actually fits with the calendar really, really well. Teachers knowing that they have a work day to work on grades the next day means that they really can focus on PD in a way that sometimes it maybe feels a little bit more stress, realizing like things they want to do the next day in class. And so it seemed like it was something that was worth giving a shot to see if that actually was a better way of doing it. So you'll notice that the early release days moved to all the quarter breaks for quarter 1, 2, and 3. And then we maintained the one in September. We just moved it to a Thursday to keep it consistent with all the others. So rather than it being on Wednesdays, since all the quarter days are ending on Thursdays, we just thought we would move that one to a Thursday, and then it's consistently 4 Thursdays out of the year rather than one Wednesday and the rest of them being Thursdays. And my apologies for not putting that in the narrative. I don't know why.
And I think part of our plan is to collect some feedback. Too,
Yes, to
because
see
now
what
they've done it a couple different ways and see
Yep.
if it did indeed work the way they thought it is going to.
So my apologies on not putting that in the narrative. That was a good catch on your part.
So this is, just again for clarity, not for you, but for anyone paying attention. Work sessions, we generally do not take action, but we've now modified that. We've put that in the agenda so we can. We have things like this, so this is actually an action item tonight. So we're being asked to approve the calendar for the changes that have been discussed. Is there any additional discussion? And if not, I'd look for a motion, if we're prepared to make these changes, a motion to adopt these changes.
I move to adopt the changes.
Okay, Paul, there's a motion, is there a second? Second. Matt, any additional discussion?
One thing just I want to point out, just so that everybody knows, that April 10th is the 5th day of the 4th quarter. So you've already had a week off in the previous week. So it's a really good thing to move that from April 10th to May 1st for the students.
Yeah, Good Friday in this, going into this calendar for 1920 would have been just basically 4 days after coming back from break.
And that, as I said, having a month and a day off is much better than having 4 days after having a week off. So it's just a much better, it's just much better for the students, I would think.
Breaks it up.
Yep.
The only concern I have is with the senior break, those 4 days, and the pressure that it's going to put on staff to make sure that everything gets done before graduation occurs. Especially as we increase the number of students that are coming through, I don't know, I'm a little concerned about that, and not knowing if that was really realized and when it was discussed. It was an oversight.
I share Kirsty's concern, which is why I asked it. And it's even a logistical thing, which is the kids always went over and practiced the ceremony. And you can't do that now because you're going to be in school. So, I mean, there's some practical things about this.
I do think that's still manageable because I do believe that the quarters will have a 2-day finals. Each quarter will have a 2-day final schedule.
Okay.
So they will do 2 finals on day 1 and 2 finals on day 2. So there will be
Free
time in the
afternoon or
afternoon
something. Yeah. Okay.
where that could happen, which is also why it made sense to do an early release day on one of those days, so.
Well, you made a point that was compelling to me, which is I think that in the Maslow's hierarchy here, the balanced quarters and sufficient time in course material outweighs to me the nicety, if you will, of the break. I like it, and I think we're going to get a little flack because of it. But be that as it may, I think it's probably the right thing to do, especially as we're changing to a block schedule.
Sarah brought up one other point. We'll see this, how it flows, is that we're checking essentially half the grades that we were before, 4 grades instead of 7 for kids that are coming up to
That's
the end.
really
That's
good
true,
point.
too,
Yeah,
yeah.
as well.
I hadn't thought about that.
That's excellent.
That'll make a big difference, I
Yeah.
think.
Is it possible, and I'm not trying to split hairs, but is there, instead of 4 days, can we do 1 day, just to try to meet in the, not necessarily meet in the middle, but to try to make some concessions to give the teachers a little bit more time, and yet seniors get a little something? They don't get the whole thing of what?
The easiest solution, if you wanted to keep, again, it depends on what you want to prioritize. So the easiest solution, if you wanted to keep some kind of early out for seniors, would be to shift some days from quarter 1.
That's just what I'm saying.
Into quarter 4, but then you're going to have middle of the week, end of quarter 3.
Yeah.
There's really not a way to avoid that. And so it becomes trade-offs.
It is.
You know, which thing do you value the most? It's doable, it just becomes more awkward for families. You know, so it's which family issue do you want to prioritize early out for seniors, or do you want the fact that we're having a Wednesday teacher work day, you know, at the end of the quarter?
Well, and if you end the quarter in the middle of the week, you know, a whole lot of teachers that Friday, the way it's set up, they're getting their grades done, and that weekend, they're planning for the next quarter.
Or they're doing grades.
Oh,
Friday,
yeah,
Saturday.
some of each.
Yeah.
To take that weekend out of there. Tough. That's very tough.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor of the changes that are recommended, which include balancing the quarters, the early out change, and the shifting around of the PD contact days, the bottom kind of around Martin Luther King, but it's really more than that.
Yeah.
As Joe was saying, it moves 1 day later into the kind of the stretch of no breaks.
And moving the early release days.
And moving the early resignations. Yes, so all that's on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, appreciate you kind of dealing with our questions and thoughts there.
Yeah.
And let me just reemphasize, I think you both said it, I think it would be good to take that back to the groups that would be impacted the most by the senior change and the grades and all that sort of thing, just to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will go back to, you know what, why don't we, I'm gonna, a little executive action here. Why don't we do 7.2, an action item, we've got a couple of guests, and that way they don't have to kind of hang out for this. So let's call, I think Yale, you're gonna come up?
Sure.
Okay. And Dave, are you gonna handle this, the other kind of part?
Stay with you. Yep.
Okay. Is that okay, everybody?
Yes.
All right. So we're on item 7.2. This is approval of extended field trips. This is kind of something we do routinely, especially when they're new or different. So with that, Dave, why don't you kick us off? And hand
Sure.
over to Yale, whatever you want.
We'll do the Yales first. So
Okay.
according to the field trip policy 610, which I'm sure Christie could recite at this point, right?
Absolutely. That's why I was up at 3 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, these 2 trips fall into this extended field trip category, which do require board approval, and I think there are times when you would probably look at these ahead of time and just do a consent, right?
Yeah.
But again, we're doing some new stuff and seeing how this works. Thought it might be nice to take a closer look at these, and we'll take a closer look at the Takata Learning Center English Department field trip first. And this is really a culminating activity for these kids who have done some really unique things with Kelly, and Yale's been involved in that as well. So we think this is going to be a great thing for those students. It's kind of almost a capstone for what they've worked on this year. And I don't know, I'll ask Yale to maybe speak a little bit to it if you'd like to. And I should say, sorry, Yale, this is Yale's first board meeting, so we're going to make this a good one.
They say that your first at bat, I guarantee it.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, I'm sure everyone here knows Takata Learning Center, and I think the building as itself has been trying to find different ways to continue to support the students. They lack a social worker as of, I think, completely this year and partway through last year. So I think a lot of staff have found different ways to kind of try and reach out to dig a little deeper and help provide students with an experience that would get them through a lot of what they're going through. And so part of the field trip was to be able to pull students away from the norms, which is the everyday family life or the everyday school life, and just kind of get away to a location that might pull away from the usual stressors. When you go home, there's environmental things that affect students. Within the building, there's physical things that affect how someone is feeling. So I think the idea was to get them to a place to dig a little deeper and have those conversations and writing practices that we'd be working on. We decided to do something during the week because a lot of students might be working over the weekends to support their families or themselves. And so we thought during the week, during the school week, that would be probably the best opportunity to be able to get them away.
One other thing with this is this field trip is funded through a CEF grant as well. So I know some of you are probably familiar with the request that was here. Kelly really wanted to be here tonight, and she's texted multiple times that she's available standby by phone if we need you as well. But I told her I think we have it. So
we can play with her a little bit, just give her a phone.
Yeah.
Oh, this is on the edge, I don't know.
yeah.
Come up with a 3-4 vote.
That's right.
Yeah, I believe this is the first time that Kelly will be doing this with the students at Takata.
Okay. Yeah. And just to go back to 610, the first time it does come to the board for approval. After that, it's just an ongoing, if they choose to do it again. So you wouldn't probably get these other than a heads up they're going if in the future.
How was the number 14 settled on? Is that just what the grant would provide, or how are you going to get
Size
the
of the
students?
class?
For the students?
Yeah.
I believe the last time I discussed, yeah. So it was just 14 students to make sure there was a manageable amount of students,
Right.
plus a location to be able to house us all.
Okay.
With 2 chaperones, myself and Kelly.
So you have a process then for determining which 14 students?
There would be students who've already participated in her creative writing classes.
Okay. Questions on this one?
I would say after the presentation that I saw at the high school of the students reading their work, and then Kelly sent me a website I could go to read other additional submitted work. I think the class is doing marvelous work. This would be a continuation of that. I think it's excellent.
You said, Yale, you'd be going and Kelly would be going. So we have 2 chaperones, so it would be 1 per 7 is the ratio. We're comfortable with that, right? All right, shall we turn to the other one?
Okay. The second one is a baseball trip. And again, Mr. Schlepper would have arranged his schedule to be here, but he trusted me to share the information in these papers. So this is almost like a bunch of families going on spring break together. They're going to the exotic location of, I think, Bettendorf, Iowa. I think it was.
Tropical.
Wow. Is that?
Some schools.
Yeah, Bettendorf, average temp 58, and they have a bunch of artificial turf fields, so they will get a chance to play. There are 76 players. He sent me some addition. Did we put that in here?
76.
I attached the email that from back in
Yeah.
February.
You know what, he sent me an additional one after this that said, note, Dave, of our 76 players, 66 of them are coming on the trip. Those not going are going on spring break and family vacations somewhere else. So nobody is being left out here. And this was totally optional, and families are a key part of this. They will all be there, as you kind of maybe looked through and saw some of that. So we think it'll be a good trip for them, and they'll get a lot of time on the field. And really, I'm surprised when he told me that many kids and families are going. So it's a lot.
Sounds good for the economy of Bettendorf.
Yeah.
And Davenport.
Yep. Yes. So any questions on the baseball field trip?
just overall on both, it seems like fantastic opportunities for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think we've all been in favor of opportunities for kids to be involved.
Yes.
And to do it as families, that's really
Right.
cool.
Yeah, it is.
I like that.
It really is.
Yep.
Okay, so again, we're being asked to approve these. Can we just take them together, Sarah? Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve both the baseball trip and the TLC trip. Thank you, Joe.
I'll second.
Thank you, Angela. Any further discussion?
Just a thank you to all the staff involved. Everybody,
Sure.
this is fantastic.
Always takes more time. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Gail, very much. Thank you,
Thanks,
Kelly.
Gail. You're going to come back every other Monday now?
Yeah. Do you have a certificate or something?
He has.
You did, you got a base hit your first at bat. All right, so we're done with 7. Let's move back up to the discussion items, and we'll begin with 9.1. Matt, you want to come on up?
Is there any way we can move Matt further down?
Just to kind of keep him hanging out?
Oh, yeah, safe matter forward.
He's already in trouble. Okay.
Little rookie hazing, man.
That sounds that way. All right, so I was asked to bring forward.
This is new in online. It got posted here. Okay, go ahead.
Mike and David asked me to come in and talk about the all sports agreement. So, give you a little bit of background. All sports agreement is the basically we use one vendor for uniforms, equipment, branding needs for the athletic office. This would be like a head-to-toe agreement with an exclusive vendor, so a singular vendor. Shakopee has been approached by 2 vendors this past year, so BSN and Universal. And this isn't the first time that we've been approached. The first time was in 2017. It was brought to John Janke. At that point, he didn't feel like it was appropriate to bring to the board. But in 2019, we feel like it's an opportunity for us now. The local base for each of the vendors, Universal is out of Edina, and then BSN Sports is in Maple Grove. Currently, BSN we use for more of our uniform needs, and Universal has been more of our equipment needs. And then just for some history, or at least some, we basically have some neighboring schools that are currently in these agreements. So Minnetonka, Edina, Jordan, Apple Valley, St. Peter, just to name a few that are real close to us that are currently doing an all sports agreement. So again, we have two proposals on the table. The first one is from BSN, and Under Armour would be our official product line. It's a 5-year contract. The total number is big. It's $130,000 in the 5 years, but it's really broken down into all 5 years. So for BSN, the first year is basically $20,000 in promo gear, $30,000 in branding, and then years 2 through 5 are $20,000 a piece for promo gear. It does require.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I want to make sure I understand. I'm not sure I am understanding that. When you say
Sure.
promo gear, is it they're providing to us, or that's what we have to spend?
Nope. So they provide us $20,000 of promotional gear right out of the gate.
Okay.
So that's the incentive to go with them, is that we would get $20,000 in Under Armour gear right out of the gate. So that could be used for equipment, that could be used for uniforms, that could be used for apparel, and then it's kind of at our discretion what we would do with it as a school.
Okay.
And then the $30,000 in branding is like vinyl, it could be tablecloths, it could be wall branding, it could be graphics, things of that nature. It could be tents for our track teams, all things that we could use to get that Shakopee Saber, whether it be in our schools or onto our playing fields a little bit more.
So in talking to Matt as well, this was new information for me. We're spending beyond this every year, so the first $20,000 is essentially a coupon, right? Or it's covered.
Yeah. So
What are we spending a year?
yeah, that's a little bit tricky to get to right now, and being my first year, it's tough. I can tell you right now, our uniform budget is $40,000, and we will blow through. We're completely through $40,000 just in uniforms alone, and that's not taking into account anything we do equipment-wise. So I would say a rough estimate would be somewhere between probably $100,000 and $200,000, and I know that's pretty vague, but I could give you a much better number closer to the end of the year. Once we, when you talk about all of our sports, the 27 sports, if each of them spend just a couple thousand, it adds up pretty quick. So with BSN, similar to Universal, you're required to use BSN for all of your equipment and your uniform needs. The proposal for BSN requires all of the teams to do an online store. So I would say majority of our teams do an online store, whether it be right now through Valley, Innovative, BSN, Universal. They basically can just a la carte pick one. We haven't really restricted anything on those. And then they would work through teams to set up, whether it be t-shirts, sweatshirts, etc. But with the BSN, it requires every one of our teams to go through their online store. It does still give us the opportunity to work with local vendors for like our silk screening and our embroidery services, which could be actually a benefit to them. Right now, I think if you would ask all of them, they get maybe a sport or two. We could actually attempt to set something up where they could do all of our silk screening or all of our embroidery and actually, potentially have a bigger business on that side. And then it also, on top of the promotional and branding products, it gives you rebate options. So the rebate options, as you can see there, I don't necessarily have to go through all of them, but basically up to about 100,000, you get 3% back. Up to 150,000, it kicks in 5%. And then if you spend over 150,000, you get 10% back to the school. So that's the BSN. Universal is very similar. Same thing, Under Armour would be our official line, 5 years. Their money is spread out just a little bit differently. So they have quite a bit less in promo, 15,000 the first year and then 10,000 the next 4 years. But the way that they're getting to that 130,000 is they're giving us 25,000 the first 3 years to be spent on transition uniform money. So BSN says we you by year 5 to get into all varsity Under Armour uniforms. What Universal is saying is we'd really like you to get in there in 3 years. So we're going to try to bump you up and get that. Basically, same thing, requires everybody to use Universal. The difference between Universal and BSN is we're not required to use their online store, so it could be, Innovative, Valley, etc. if we wanted to go that route. And then same thing, ability, if we do use Universal, we still could use them for silk screening. And then the rebates are just a little bit different. You have to, the 3% goes all the way up to 150,000, 150 to 250 is 5%, and then 10% is 250 or more. I think I'd be pretty surprised if we got to the 250 mark. So that's where we could be losing some significant money with the Universal side of things. What I can tell you though is we've only used Universal in all the stuff that I found, as far as 7 or 8 years back, for our football. And so football is reconditioning, whether it be shoulder pads, helmets. And so if you don't use, or if you do use Under Armour and it's not if you use Universal and it's not Under Armour, you still get a rebate anywhere ranging from 3 to 7%. So it just depends on how much you spend on that. So it's a lot to digest. Certainly can answer questions, but my recommendation is I think it's a positive step for the athletic department. The money is very similar. I think the BSN positives is all the money that is spent on the online store counts towards your rebate money. So that's very significant. You talk about 60 to 70 kids on teams, and if everyone spends $50 to $100, all of that counts towards money that could potentially come back to us. And the rebates escalate quite a bit quicker when you talk about the 5% at 100,000 and then 10% at 150. With the Universal, the positives is, that transition money, you get it much quicker. So if anything happened to our proposal, the first 3 years getting 75,000 is pretty big. And then the fact that we don't have to use Universal for our online stores. If you were to ask me today what my recommendation would be, it would be BSN. But I think it's worth a good discussion. I'll take questions.
Sure. Isn't it also, just in looking at this, that yes, Universal would give the $25,000 per year, but now you're actually accelerating your uniform replacement cycle,
Yes.
so you're not necessarily coming out better, you're
Yeah.
spending the money, which is,
Yeah.
I get why they're trying to do it, they want you wearing Under Armour, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, we might be replacing uniforms that still have a lot of life left in them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just so that they can, you know,
Yep.
get their logo.
What is the life of our uniforms? What-
Yeah, it varies. You know, it depends on the sport, but 3 to 6 years is typical life.
Are booster clubs bound by the same, like if a booster club wanted their own online store, can they do it? Or how does that work?
We would have a online store. If it was with BSN, we'd have an online store for every single one of them. If they chose to do something outside of it, we can't control booster clubs. So technically.
And that would
we
void the
could.
contract, it would be in prohibition of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just separate of it.
Okay.
You know, obviously, I would think we would want to try to get out in front of it and give the benefits. You know, again, if we're talking 50 to 60 parents or families at about $100, we're talking some significant money that could be coming back to us, and that's not something that a booster club would be able to do, so.
Be a good selling point as well.
Yeah.
Are the rebates retro to $1?
Just help me out. So like the first dollar we spend up to that?
Well, if you spend, so the 5%, is it, you get 3% up to 100,000,
Yeah.
then it's the next
Yeah.
50,000, whatever? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understand the online store. Is that like if the team all wants, it's not part of their uniform, they want jackets?
Yeah,
Is that what
and,
it's
and I would say, you know, I would bet 9 out of every 10 sports are doing an online store. Yeah, just to get, you know, like say it's lacrosse, just to get everybody that comes to the game into a Shakopee lacrosse shirt. So yeah, they're pretty popular.
Since your recommendations is BSN, can you flip back to that screen? I don't even know how to ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway. It says all teams to use them. How do we determine who qualifies for that? And I'm going to be like really way out there. We create a chess club. Well, are they required to somehow use this? Or is it only Minnesota State High School League sports? And how does this
Yeah,
work?
so right now the way it's written is it's all athletic teams. So we could certainly ask them to do all activities or the entire school. You know, I would say the school, not the district, because I don't want to be in elementary and middle school stuff. But right now, it's stated that it's just athletic teams. So just our, you know, varsity down to 9th grade.
So then how does boys volleyball fall in, since it's not yet an official?
They would
Minnesota-
not. They would not fall in. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They could if they chose.
They
to
certainly
participate.
could. I would advocate, you know, as
Sure.
maybe an emerging program to jump on because, you know, they could possibly be part of the benefits.
Do we know if BSN would allow that and would
Sure.
count them towards the, yes or no, or?
Yeah, I guarantee, yeah.
Okay.
Almost a guarantee, yeah. They want everything to come through them.
All right.
So one of the questions I have is local vendors. Do we know how much business goes through Valley and Innovative Graphics? And I know that, you know, we'll still have the ability to work with them, but will we be taking money away from our local?
Yeah, that's that I-
concerning to me.
Yeah, and when I talked to Dave, that was my first concern was, you know, not only new to the position, new to an agreement, you know, I've got friends that work in these places, I don't necessarily want to be taking away their, you know, their livelihood. I think if I were to, it's a guess, it's not an exact science, but I would say maybe a handful of teams are, you know, each season, so 10 to 15 total are going through Valley or Innovative. And I wouldn't know a number of, you know, what they're spending or how much it would affect them. I firmly believe if we got into a contract with them for silk screen and embroidery, they probably would be making more. You know, just with the sheer volume of everything would go through them, that's significant. So my guess would be instead of doing 5 to 10 teams, if you got 15 teams and you got all of that, you know, it'd be better, but that's just speculation.
So the big get for us out of this is the rebate we're not getting now. Right now we're spending the money on the equipment. This alternative, to Reggie's point, allows us to buy, we can phase in, we don't have to retire perfectly good gear. But we're able to recognize $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 back in cash or in credits that we aren't getting.
Yeah,
In addition to the promotional.
in addition to
Yes.
promotional stuff.
So would you expect, now I'm projecting, let's say we do something like this, and you've got the promotional spending through the first 5 years, it's a 5-year contract. If you renew, would it be logical to assume that something like that would continue, or is it, you're no longer a new customer anymore, so?
No, I think they went pretty aggressive at Shakopee, just because of the size of our school, upcoming programs that are doing well. As you see this week again, representing at the state tournament, you can't, in their minds, you can't put a price on that. And so I think this is something where they want this to be a 5-year deal, and as long as we're willing and things are going well, we would just keep extending. And it could give us a little bit of leverage depending on what we spend in the first 5 years. If we're even blowing them out of the water and they're so happy, it could change some things for us.
With
You know,
this, go ahead, Julie.
When you're buying Under Armour stuff just on your own from a store, that's a much more expensive brand than, say, well, even a Nike. I think it's
Yeah.
more expensive than Nike. So what do we know about the cost of uniforms there?
Yeah, there are some, we do get some discounts if we, go exclusive. Some things, if they're in stock, could be up to 40% off. And so those are benefits. I think a lot would determine, we could do some cost analysis, but I think we're spending anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 on a full new set of uniforms, and if we could whittle that down at all, it's going to be a benefit. And then if you're getting a little bit back to you too, I think that's where the benefit comes from in my mind.
It would be good to know, though.
Sure.
Before going into this, what's comparable for different.
Yeah.
And then what about, I know this is teams, but what about, I know band, do they do their own apparel?
They just did an apparel, yeah. And I'm not sure.
Something be included in something like this, or
We certainly can, at least invite them into that.
fine arts, choir,
Yeah.
theater?
Can we, for Matt's sake, I think you just said it, I can't remember. It would be good to know this before we go into an agreement. Like, what are, let's get the specific questions that we want to come back with.
There's 3 I've heard. I'm going to take a stab at it.
Okay.
So the first one is comparability of pricing for non-Under Armour uniform. In other words, are we moving from a Ford uniform to a Cadillac uniform, and thus we're paying more, even though we're getting rebates? That's one. 2, I had the same question and thought that Christy did, which is, can we quantify, can we qualify the impact on the local vendors a little bit more? I think that'd be important to know. And then the third one now escaped my mind.
How much we're spending locally?
Well, let's add that, just kind of in the mix, but I
If we
think
can get that.
maybe it's just what other, because it's supposed to be a positive, what other groups and organizations can perhaps partake in this, and will they in fact be part of the overall spend? So whether it's band or some club or boys volleyball as an example, which would technically fall outside of it at this point, but could it be in it? And that's not the question. The third one, I don't remember now what it was. Help me somebody with another question you want to have follow-up on.
Well, I think it would be good to have the cost analysis to show, here's the brand that we have now, this is how much we're spending. If we had to buy a new uniform, this is what it's going to cost. Under this new agreement, this is the new cost, and the kickback we get is
Rebate.
X, rebate, whatever. Yeah, rebate. That's what we call it.
Use rebate.
Our rebate option on each.
Yeah. Now, what are the, I guess, protection ratings for an Under Armour football helmet as opposed to a Rydell or?
Yeah, and some of that stuff we wouldn't even, we would use BSN Sports, but we wouldn't use like an Under Armour helmet. So we would have to use what we currently use. So that'd be like a Rydell, a Shutt, and that, so football is really, that's why, and Universal kind of had that pegged, like, we know you're not using Under Armour for football, you know, so you're using what's safe, what's, you know, Under Armour's an emerging, I would say that's not our safe bet to use for football. I don't think our coach would want to do it either, so. And I think there is a little bit of a rebate. It's not as significant as Universal when it comes to, you know, if we spent $50,000 outside of Under Armour.
So
you get a little
protective
bit.
equipment, we're allowed to go to what's going to give these kids
Yeah.
the best protection.
Yeah, and I think I had it here in one of my sheets that. Yeah, I'll get it for you, but it was pretty similar to what Universal did. There's like a 3 to 7% once you hit that threshold of a rebate, but we're not compromising safety for $1.
So even though it says Under Armour's official product line, you use Rydell as an example, we're not bound by that for.
No, and it's, and this I should clarify, it's uniform based. This is all uniform based.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
not protective
Yeah,
equipment.
equipment wise is going through BSN to order equipment. So uniform based, it's the Under Armour. They want to see it somewhere. They want to see this logo everywhere, including, you know, every single uniform if they possibly can. We would use BSN for all of our equipment needs. So that could be a Rydell, that could be a Shutt, that could be, you know, I think they got like Quick Goals, and so they got several different, you know, brands, but we would only be ordering, every one of our orders would go through BSN.
And equipment counted toward the totals as well.
Yeah.
Do they only offer Under Armour? Or is that just a contract proposal that they presented to us?
No, they offer Nike as well. Yeah, and the proposals are very similar. We just, as a kind of quick poll within our staff, you know, we've used Under Armour quite a bit for uniforms in the last few years, so that's why we ventured that way. But there is an offer from Nike that's very similar.
That would probably be another question I would add. Are there examples of teams or sports where we're going to have to make a wholesale change? In other words, they're currently Nike, as an example, and we've got to completely switch it over. It'd be good to know, gee, that's one out of, you know, 25.
Yeah, I can tell you, like, boys lacrosse just ordered Nike.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we would have 5 years to transition then?
Yeah.
Okay, and that may be
Yeah,
fine.
and they said, you know, that's their ultimate timeline. It
Right.
still falls back on us. You know, there is a little bit of wiggle there where, you know,
Okay.
I'm not going to go buy brand new lacrosse uniforms.
Right.
You know, as great as that would be for our lacrosse kids, that's also money that it's not fiscally sound to be
So
spending.
I guess my point is examples like that, if there are a few to bring back, just so we kind of know, here are the outliers, or gee, there's only truly a couple, and so this isn't a radical shift for us anyway.
And one other thing, just to, and you're probably already clear with it, when they talk about the promotional products,
Mhm.
that's the retail price of that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so to your point, Judy, we are gonna not probably get the benefit of like an outlet store pricing, but it's more significant, you know, it's a better deal than getting nothing.
and it's it just, the number looks better than
Sure.
probably in actuality for that promo, just, and not, that's more just
'Cause are we-
eyes wide open.
Do we pay retail now when we buy?
It varies, yeah. I mean, if everything's in stock, you can, you know, get discounts up to 40%. That's like the maximum percent, and everybody knows everything's marked up to start, so everybody's making money, right? So the 40%'s the most that they can go in order to just, everybody still make their pie. And then, you know, they get you a little bit with saying, oh, we don't have this in stock, so we're gonna have to order, so that, you know, it bumps you to the next price, and it's all a little bit of a game.
And then I've shared a little bit at times in this. I have some familiarity with BSN and other school districts, and they have had a pretty good track record and been flexible and have created some things really out of concern for local vendors, because as you can imagine, when they go talk to different school districts, that's a question that comes up every time. So
Yeah,
they
it
are
wasn't.
trying to work in partnership, and they
Yeah.
understand the reality we live in.
It wasn't in our initial proposal, and it was the one thing that I asked. I said, I think this is a non-starter if that can't be a part of it, and it was amended within the day, so.
Whether it's a question for follow-up or maybe you just know the answer, you listed a few local districts that are doing these kinds of things. But I'm guessing that they aren't all doing it. You don't list Eden Prairie, you don't list Bloomington just because they're next door.
Sure.
I'd like to know maybe why.
Yeah.
Not that I'm looking for the cons, but it's always good to have a balance and go, look, there's clear benefits, but it'd be nice to know, well, here's the things you need to consider if you're going to do this that you're leaving on the table or that you're
Sure.
not going to have. So
Yeah.
examples of that might be helpful too.
Yeah, I can speak to Bloomington. We were never represented.
I would like to know why Shakopee decided not to do it in 2017. I'd like to hear more about what the reasoning was then.
I can find that person.
I actually talked to that person.
You did talk to
just
them.
before this meeting.
Okay.
One last
And he said
question.
if this question comes up,
Oh,
he said
okay.
the deal wasn't anywhere near as good as the deals currently being offered. That's all I know, though. It was a
Yeah.
very short conversation.
I could certainly find out from like the Eden Prairie lens.
I'd just be curious.
Sure.
You know, let's go into it with our eyes wide open.
Sure.
What's the time frame that you want us to, I mean, we're just talking about it tonight, so
Yeah.
is this our next board meeting, so a couple of weeks, or is this, we gotta act by?
No,
next
I
day?
think both of them presented in January, and both of them were on like a 60-day clock, and I told them that's just not possible. And I said, I'm not quite sure when we'll even get it to the school board, and I figured, I'm hoping I'm answering it the best I can, but I figured the first time is going to be a lot of questions and a lot of research, and we're going back. I think that BSM was pretty upfront and said they'd like us sooner than later because they can't guarantee the 2020 for the 5 years if we got into the summertime. Universal felt like it was pretty standard all the way through, so I would give us a timeline of 6 weeks. Does that sound 6 to 8 weeks? That puts us the middle of, what is that, first part of May to middle of May to have a decision.
Really, it's how long it takes you to feel comfortable with collecting information and coming
Right.
back to us.
Right.
But that certainly was reasonable.
It'll still
A little
be-
longer, frankly, than I thought you were gonna say.
It'll still be winter then.
Yeah.
6 weeks gets us to the regular board meeting in April, roughly.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what is that, the end of April board meeting? So I would love to say that could be possible. We're a little bit busy this week, depending on next
Good.
week. And then we started spring sports today. You never know. But yeah, I think we should be able to do something.
Okay.
And then just for my, come back to another session like this to maybe answer questions, is that kind of the next step? Or?
Yeah, I think if the intent would be to take action, I'm guessing it would be
Sure.
following your recommendations. So if you can come back and say, look, if you have to refresh anything about the presentation, here's the questions I heard, here's some answers. Now I'm open for other questions, and otherwise you're looking for us to take action at that point.
Okay.
There's probably a good chance that sports teams might hear that this is something.
Sure.
And you guys are probably going to get some other questions
Right.
that maybe aren't on our list, in which case, you want to go directly to Matt? You want to do it that way, or you want to flow through Sarah to Matt, or what do you guys, what's easier?
Well, I think that if anybody gets a question and they don't, being on the board, and you don't feel equipped to answer it, I would suggest we just pass it on to Matt and say, add this to the list and let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else? All right, thank you.
All right.
Interesting stuff.
Interesting, yeah.
Very interesting. All right.
Okay, next time, Matt is requesting to be first.
Enjoyed myself today.
Yeah, wife and kid as well.
All right. 5.2, we're going to talk about school safety plan, development, and training.
So I'm
And
gonna,
Ed's going to join you, I think?
and Heidi.
And Heidi, too, excellent.
So Ed, Heidi, and I, and quite a few other people are, oops,
Oh, we got dueling boots here tonight.
I know, Paul, you and I are matching.
Welcome to the club.
we are, Ed and Heidi and I and a host of other people are working on our crisis/safety plan in the district. and we've made some progress on what our plan is to really move that forward in a systematic way. And so we're going to share some of that information with you here tonight.
I'm laughing because I just noticed 16 minutes.
Put us-
Remember, it was 8
That's
minutes
very
last time?
precise.
Yeah.
Okay, you're
Ready?
60, you're 50, 20 to go.
Okay, guys, can we do this? It'll be the first agenda item that sticks to the clock tonight. Where it's Dale should be fine. It's 5 minutes.
Is it long, 5 minutes?
Yeah, okay. We had our school mental health professionals, our psychologists, our social workers, and our counselors recently have a group come in from University of Wisconsin River Falls, and they talked about these two guys listed up here, and they talked to this group, and I had a chance to sit in, and Nancy had a chance to sit in, and they talked about school crisis and safety planning in a way that really responded to kind of both parts. They were Scott Scott W. and
Just
Todd
remember, you don't
Savage.
know. Remember, you only got 16 minutes.
Okay.
Which is
Well,
Zuski,
now-
I'm gonna guess. It's a good Polish name. Which is Zuski?
Reggie's time, so we go a little over.
Nope.
Yes.
Okay.
They're both school psychology professors at UW River Falls, and they're both very heavily active in like the National School Psychology Organization. And they do a lot of work with school districts around crisis prevention, intervention, and then response.
And one of the things they talked about, which was a little different than what we have generally, our crisis plans have always kind of focused on the physical part of it. What do we do in a lockdown? And that's where the Alice tram came. A fire drill, a tornado drill, whatever the case might be, something happening in the hallway, a disturbance, whatever, a medical emergency and things like that. We haven't ever really talked about what we do on the proactive side as much. We do some things with safety and security, which you guys have done, but more kind of systemically for what's happening in a building proactively. So it's usually been about this side. It hasn't been as much about this side. And they talked about that, and they used a model from the U.S. Department of Education that says, we're going to put together a framework that addresses these 5 areas of crisis management. And this is from the Department of Ed. Okay? And they have modeled this through, or come up with training through a acronym called PREPARE. And PREPARE is prevent, reaffirm, evaluate, provide, respond, and then examine. So you get this framework that really gives you a way to think through what you're doing. And that's what they are. These guys are both certified trainers in this PREPARE program, and we'll talk more about this in just a second. Here are the objectives that are part of the PREPARE training.
Yeah, and so the objectives, starting, they're going to be introduced. We're going to be covering those 5 pillars that Dave mentioned: the prevention, protection, mitigation, response, recovery. So helping our mental health practitioners, our school administrators, teaching staff, just understand what are all these different pieces and just have a general understanding of district and school-wide crisis prevention and intervention. They'll also work on prevention methods. How do we balance that physical safety with psychological safety in a building too? Because there's times that the more you put into place to be physically safe, it can also impact some of the feelings of psychological safety as well. Be introduced to crisis preparedness through teams, plans, drills, and data. Just really trying to be more comprehensive. What does it look like? How do we respond? What do we have in place? Are we using uniform language across all buildings, across all teams? Just making sure there's a general understanding of what everybody's role is and how do we communicate. Number 4, learn how to assess for student and staff needs after a crisis event. Thinking back to some of the things that have happened in Shakopee over the last couple of years, and all the things we hear about on the news, that just how do we respond and meet the needs of our students and staff as we come back as a learning community, as a Shakopee community after something really traumatic has happened. How are we making sure that we are supporting each other during those times? Number 5, be introduced to crisis intervention types. What are the different ways that we can respond and intervene? And then how do we look for additional resources? Because we won't have all of the answers, but how can we increase the capability of our staff to be able to locate those resources, whether that's for students, for families, for staff, for each other, when they're needed. Why a good model school crisis work is necessary. There's so many consequences if we don't have this in place. The official books. There's 2 trainings, and so we have the handouts from the books. And again, I think we've focused a lot on physical safety, but if we aren't also looking at psychological safety and the impact that that has in our learning communities, it can have impact on attendance and absenteeism, academic performance, pre-existing educational problems. If a student is struggling with anxiety in the school setting and then there's an event that could exacerbate the difficulty that they're having, behavioral challenges, and long-term mental health. Mental health needs are becoming more and more prevalent in our schools, and how are we making sure that we have preventative measures in place, but then also responding and supporting when it's critically needed. And I think we've hit on this a few times, it's just we're really trying to balance that physical safety of our buildings. We've done a lot of great work over the last couple of years to put more safety measures in place, but then also making sure that we're being mindful of psychological safety. How are we meeting the emotional and behavioral needs of our students and staff? And then it's not just the response, we're also looking at how are we being proactive to support the needs of all of our students and staff. Our goal is to create a safer environment and foster academic success. At the end of the day, we're here because we want students to do well. So do we have everything in place to allow them to do so? Are we helping our students acquire the skills to be resilient, to be able to navigate through really difficult life situations and come out not just okay, but even stronger? And then how can we work together to prevent problems such as substance abuse, violence, truancy, and bullying? Those are really serious issues in all schools, and do we have systems in place to address those? A big part of what we're hoping to do with the training and with the team that we would have attending these trainings would be vulnerability assessments, and just reflecting and examining what do we have in place? What do we have in place that might be strong? We've done ALICE, we have some of those pieces in place.
I'd like to step in here. We just recently worked with Shakopee Police where the principal, myself, and 2 of our resource officers walked through the buildings to do a vulnerability assessment. And even then, there was a lot of questions that we didn't know of what is the proper way to do this, with the police being there, with us being there. This would help us. These people have researched this stuff and done it, so that's going to give us another resource to be more proactive.
So as we're doing these walkthroughs, and I got to go sit in on a couple of them, and walk through with a couple of them. It was the first time we had actually done that, like during the day, and we walked through door situations, evacuation situations, again, using this term vulnerability. Where might there be something that looking through their eyes they see that we don't see as not experts in this? So it really, it was a good first step for us. So this is one of the things that's included as part of this Prepare Workshop 1. And then there's also things like, there's a lot of things, but
and it just helps us identify what are the different variables, what are events that might trigger a minimal response where we're working with a smaller group of students, maybe with a smaller group of teacher teams, what might be an event that might trigger a response at the building level, and what might be events that are so significant that the entire district, that the entire community is going to need some level of support or response to ensure that we are meeting the needs of all who are impacted. And they would help us, and the Prepare trainers and the district team that we would have attending, we'd be able to work through a lot of these questions and identify, here's what this would look like in Shakopee schools.
okay. And then Ed's going to talk a little bit about what that training would look like specifically.
The first part is it's a one-day workshop. It's going to include a multiple staff members, teachers, wide variety. I think almost every group is represented in there. Custodians, stuff. It's going to be up to about 100 people. They're going to help us establish and sustain comprehensive school safety and crisis prevention and preparedness efforts. They're going to make the clear connection between the ongoing school safety and crisis preparedness. There's going to be a strong emphasis on the unique needs of the functions of the school teams and helping us develop these school teams. That's one of the things right now that it's not real clear which teams are doing what and who's part of that team. So they would help us guiding us in making these teams and what each team's responsibilities would be. Prepared for school crisis by developing, exercising, and evaluating safety and crisis plans. Like we've all said here, our current crisis plan basically emphasizes on the physical. So they're going to help us, they'll help us review that to make sure we're getting everything we need on that, and then they'll help us do the psychological part of it and support.
So we'll show at the end here kind of a list of who we're thinking at, this 100 is going to be, and it's pretty broad ranging, and it's that first part of it, and then there's a more detailed training.
Well, then going back on the first part, that was scheduled for August 15th is their temporary date that we have for that first Prepare 1 to go. Prepare 2 is actually a 2-day workshop. This is for more of the mental health people in the district that help us, would help with staff and students and community that needs mental health before or after an event. They're going to teach us how to help meet the mental health needs of students and staff following a school-associated crisis event. They're going to help us with crisis intervention strategies to try and help prevent the stuff. It would help us prevent and prepare for psychological trauma. They're going to help examine the effectiveness of the school crisis intervention and recovery efforts.
It's about 40 people at that one.
Yeah, that one's about 40 people. This is a list of other educational institutes throughout Minnesota that's already participating in this. As you can see, we got universities on there, other school districts.
You know, one thing, and I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning, this is one framework too that was designed by educational people for educational institutions. So it is really targeted for our setting. Okay?
That's kind of our general guideline of what we'd like to send to the first Prepare 1. And then on the second side is who we'd like to send to the Prepare 2. Our numbers do add up more than 140, so that would have to be whittled down. We're just kind of using that as a general guideline to start to find out who would be best to go to each of these courses.
We're also kind of like the airlines, we think we're overbooking a little bit. For mid-August.
Because they won't all show up.
No. We'll have a spot for you, Jimmy. So questions on that kind of overview of Prepare and what we're thinking we want to do with this going forward?
Questions?
So basically, we're just trying to take the physical threats, the psychological threats, and just kind of merge it into under one umbrella.
Yeah, yep. But a lot of the psychological stuff we haven't prepared for. So that's going to be something, I mean, some of it we have.
That's what we have, and I think we've heard a common need be identified from our social workers, from our school counselors, from our school psychologists, is we don't have anything consistent in place across our district for any of our crisis response. That it really depends on who the staff member is who happens to be pulled in, but we don't have a consistent, if this event happens, here's how we're going to respond, and here's what the different roles look like. I think back to the previous school year, we actually had 2 students at the high school pass away. One student was in a car accident, the other one had a medical condition, and at the high school there wasn't a consistent way to respond because we didn't have a plan in place. And that was part of where this need was identified, because for both students, we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students, the teachers, the parent educators, community members. And by not having a plan in place, everybody was doing the best that they could, but there wasn't as much consistency as I think there could have been, which it's hard because these significant events have a huge impact on how our community is doing.
Okay, now with, say, God forbid another tragedy happens, does this take the place of like bringing in grief counselors, or does this enhance?
What it would actually do is establish a framework for who would, I think we would still bring in grief counselors. What it would do is clarify, the the school counselors, what's their role? Are the social workers reaching out to social workers in other buildings to make sure that they are coming to the high school if that's where the event was? It's not necessarily changing the who, it's clarifying what everybody is doing and what the response looks like. So I think we would still consider accessing other grief counselors, pulling in staff from other buildings, using our resources the best that we can, but just in a more organized and structured way so that there's not this period of time where nobody knows what to do because different groups of people were doing a lot of different things. Whereas if we have a clear plan as to here's what this person does, here's what this person does, here's who communicates with Mike, who reaches out to the superintendent's office. If we have clear steps as to who does what, it allows us to be able to respond in a more timely manner and in a more effective manner to make sure everybody's needs are being met.
I noticed in both Prepare 1 and 2, there are relatively few teachers, and I realize this is especially for like social workers and counselors, et cetera. But I'm wondering what is the plan for dispensing the information throughout? Because I think that would be important. Is this a train the trainer?
So what we would do as part of these trainings is develop what our district plan is going to look like, and then we would identify a representative team from the people who attended these trainings to share this information out with staff across the buildings so that they have just so that they know this is what the plan looks like, here's what might be in the plan, and here's what everybody's level of response would look like, and here's what you can expect if unfortunately one of these events were to happen, that there would be some sort of training and share out with whatever plan is developed by the team. And this would be within Shakopee schools too. This training would be for our staff only. And so the 3 days of training, the 1 day of training for workshop 1 and the 2 days of training for workshop 2 are really focused on our unique school district and the unique needs of our buildings as well. So it's really going to focus on what our district needs.
I think it's critical for our district to do this. It's in the world that we live in today, having all those plans in place is extremely critical. So I'm glad that we're looking at doing this.
And we're glad to be able to work with these guys who are really focused on educational settings as well. And this is something, I don't know if it was prepared exactly, but our counselors, psychologists, and social workers have been, I understand, asking for, trying to push for something for a number of years. So they're actually very, if you can get excited about something that's kind of crisis-based, they're very excited about this.
I have a few kind of blocking and tackling questions, just basic questions. So this is going to be held, is this something you're going to bring back for an approval, or you're just kind of telling us we're doing this and we're just making you aware of what we're doing?
That choice B.
Okay, that's fine. So I'm assuming there's a cost associated with this, however. So it'd be good to know what, and I don't even know that now if you don't know, but it'd be good to know that. It'd also be good to know, since we haven't approved the 1920 budget yet, that that's being contemplated as part of that, so that we can check the box on the finances. That's number one. Is there any kind of a, for lack of a better term, a certification we get coming out of this, that our district is certified in Prepare, or?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that we would be, I don't know if advertise is the best way, but we would be acknowledged as a school district who has this sort of plan in place. We are able to, if we wanted to go one step farther and have some staff become official train the trainers for Prepare, that's something that we could do as well, so that we could continue to have more formal trainings without having to go with outside consultants. But for this first one, using like nationally recognized professors is a good way to get started.
My third question, and I think you answered this because Judy touched on it in her question. It sounds like we're going to come out of this with, for lack of a better term, a plan, a system, tool, versus, and I don't mean to be demeaning when I say this, but a bunch of people sitting in a room getting a lot of intellectual, individual level enhancement, and then they move on to another district in 2 years, and we've lost that. So I'm hoping we're going to get some institutional knowledge out of this, and if it's a plan, it's a hard thing, we can say, this is the steps we're going to go through, here are the checklists we have, here's who's responsible, then that's a tangible thing we're going to benefit from, versus just, helping us think through this.
Yeah, that, I think we'll get some of both.
Okay.
But the goal is obviously to walk out with a plan that carries on whether I stay or
There
go
you go.
or whoever it is. But this is not a done deal, but to your point, just to give you an idea, sorry, you guys. So we might have a one-page visual of what's happening, and down here is like a checklist of building-wide. These are the things that have to happen every year, some nuts and bolts things. This is a training plan we have, whether it's annual cycle or multi-year cycle or something, that we make it easy and clean for people to do what we planned on doing. There's going to be a lot more behind it, but this is almost like one of the takeaways that I don't think we have something. It's like, oh yeah, I need to do that, or this has to happen, and so this will help us get to that. I think you're asking for kind of a system.
Yeah, well, that makes me much more comfortable. It sounds like a great thing to do, but if it's a one-time and done, and you lose the people who have the knowledge, what have you gained? If it's a system and or institutional learning, then I see a lot of benefit to it, so I'm pleased to hear that.
And like you said on that checklist there, that's going to be a yearly thing. Part of it's going to be reviewing the plan to see if there needs to be any changes or anything like that. I'm not sure, I'm new to the district here, but when we got the crisis plan, some of the information on there was already outdated, and that was from a year, was it a year or two?
2 years ago.
No more than 2 years ago, and that information was already outdated. So part of this is instituting the yearly checkup and making sure everything's updated. If we get a new principal in a building or something like that, make sure they know what's going on. That's going to be part of our yearly checkup that they're going to help us put in place to make sure that we stay current.
It's really good.
Part of the recommendation we did to develop a district-wide crisis response prevention committee as well, to do some of those periodic checks as well, to make sure that you're always being mindful of changes that might be happening within your building, within your staffing, so that everything is always up to date.
Would you be willing to go back to there were questions about the cost, and I know that the Prepare 2 is built in on 2 school days. Most of that staff would not need a sub, and that was part of that decision to schedule it then. So it'd be within kind of typical structure of a work week for folks. And then I think the Prepare 1.
We did that really during the summer, and there is quite a number of people that we would typically need to pay for that day. We are working out a way to trade out either a PD day during the year or like a planning workshop day that our counselors, schools, psychs, and social workers might not normally have as much to do, so we're mitigating the cost that way as well. And sometimes those are trickier things to do, but this group was all on board for doing that. They're willing to kind of make, I don't know if you'd call it a sacrifice or whatever, but be flexible with that to make this work, understanding we're trying to be flexible. We also have a couple of our, I can't remember, psychs or social workers who had worked with these professors at UW River Falls, and so I guess there's a former student discount that we're also receiving from the trainers.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant.
Yeah, the
as
trainers
well.
are knocking off about about a third of their cost, just because we continue to work with them to mentor new school psychologists who need internship experiences. So we're getting a discount.
What's really good for us, we all have, as building leaders or whatever, try to do this and you follow the rules, but having somebody that can really guide us through a framework and a process to look at the whole thing is really going to help us.
Yeah.
Just like Ed was talking about when we walked through with the police, even though they haven't really done a whole lot of that, having somebody that just has that different lens that we're not trained in is really going to be beneficial for us.
Over the years, I think, at the high school I can speak to at least, I bet there were 6 or 7 different approaches to social emotional education. And I think one of the best things that can come out of this is we're all going to decide this is the way we're going to go, and that consistency, I think, will make a much better impact than the sort of little Band-Aid things.
And while it would be nice to have this, like they said yesterday, you can see our training plan goes into next year. So it's going to take us a while to get to where we want to be. And if we do, as like Ed said, part of our system is, it's an annual check of this. Our goal would be to just make it better each time. So, but it'll take us a little while.
Okay.
16
else?
We went over by
Good talk.
2 minutes and 29
Bravo,
seconds.
bravo, good work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, so can we have one more minute on this topic?
Coming out of Ford's.
Sorry, Ed, would you just talk about this real
I just
quick?
wanted to bring to you guys' attention, in case you guys didn't know, Alice is just a small part of our crisis plan, and it's also part of the prepare also. It's just a small piece of the puzzle. This year, we have about a little over 90% of our staff that has gone through the online Alice training. It's probably a little bit more because some of the staff didn't print out their certificate, and you don't finalize it until you print it out either in PDF form or download it and print it. So we're probably higher, closer to 98% of our staff that's gone through that. The second part of the Alice is it's a train-the-trainer, so you get the live experience and the live training. When we reached out to do that, the closest place they did this, it's a 2-day training, was in Des Moines, Iowa. I asked him, how long is it going to be till you got something sooner? And he goes, as soon as you host an event. And I said, tell me about it. So we are hosting an Alice training event.
Is this the,
Was it
Amanda, was
for
this in the
two?
paper? There was an article? Was this what was in the paper?
Yes,
here
it was.
sometime?
Yeah, we put this in the paper.
Yeah, I remember.
Yep.
Okay.
So that is on April 2nd and 3rd over spring break. It's going to be held at the high school. Currently, we have 27 people outside of our district that have signed up for this. This is police forces, fire departments, other schools, other educational institutions, county workers. It's a big variety of people that are interested in this. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention that we are hosting this on April 2nd and 3rd. We're going to have some of our staff go through that. And then that's just the next step in Alice, that we can do some live interaction training on a personal development day or something like that, just to reinforce the online part that we did.
And the benefit to hosting was?
We get free people for however, it's a $600 class, $595 per person to go. We get free people for how many we got. Currently, we get 3 free people to go to attend that with the numbers we have. If we do get up to 35, we get a 4th person that gets to attend that meeting for free. So.
Good. Great updates, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to item 5.3. I think this is our last substantive topic. And Dave, you're going to just, this is the assessment. No, Ford's coming up, sorry.
Ford's coming with me, yeah.
Assessment dashboard. Ford's been so patient sitting right there.
Yeah,
It's a great place to be. I got to watch.
Do we need to take a break though and actually recognize somebody in the room for a momentous occasion today? Y'all know about that? Yeah.
I've heard a rumor.
Yeah, I think it might be somebody's birthday, perhaps?
It might be.
Oh. Should we sing for Ford?
Would that be a first?
No.
Would be a first. And it'd be on tape too. We won't do that. We'll just wish you a happy birthday.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
So next time Ford would also like to be first.
First. If we knew it was your birthday, we would have.
That would be a
I
gift.
got to be here for all like Matt, Heidi,
Dave, you do realize
You're the cleanup guy.
everybody can't go first.
I know. But I want to say I'm lobbying for.
Sure, everybody.
Everybody talk at one point.
Okay. All right, good?
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. All right, so Dave came and said to me and said, let's take a look at maybe finding a way to clearly articulate how our district is responding to new legislation with ESSA federally, and then also continue to respond to the World's Best Workforce, which is statewide legislation on how to make sure that our students are progressing as they should be. So here you can see World's Best Workforce, which is the state one. Every Student Succeeds Act is the state or is the federal one. And then Minnesota North Star is the new accountability system this year, and that's Minnesota's way of responding specifically to ESSA. And the way that we put it together, it helped me really understand it even further, and how we kind of graphically put it together in this as we move forward here.
And we've talked about this before, and this is a slide, I think, well before us even came that I shared. And when you guys were running, I'm sure you were watching and studying all of the board videos. And so this is old news, right? That there's
They all got it down quick.
Just take it down and we'll ask him. We'll quiz him.
And, so you can see that there's a little bit of overlap where you can see these work together, but they really are separate systems. And World's Best Workforce, again, state, district level stuff. ESSA is, you operate at both the state and the district, or the school and the district level. Okay?
Yes.
You want me to-
This is
go
Dave's
ahead.
idea, but I'll explain it and then he'll correct me. So what we're trying to do again, we're trying to respond to each of these things, and Dave saw a graphic similar to this from Akron, Ohio School District that just laid it out as just clearly as possible and gave a percentage for not just each category that they decided was important, and the categories they decided were important also lined up with ESSA, like reading by third grade and kindergarten readiness, etc. But then it also broke it down by ethnicity, and it also broke it down by, and I don't know that theirs did, but we were looking at also breaking it down by special education students and English language learners, as well as students on free and reduced lunch. So you can see the categories. We are not, this is not a finished product by any means. We're still in the learning process with this as well, because we want to make it as good as possible. We want to get it in front of you as soon as possible as well, so you can give us a little bit of feedback.
So just to connect this, if you look at the top, you'll see where we have the WBWF and the ESSA up there for each of those. And the idea is we have so much data, is there a way we can present this, and this is what we're working on, so this is still being baked right now. Quick glance, how are we doing on those measures, okay? And to show you kind of the alignment, this is a screenshot of something from our improvement planning template. So when you look at this again, you're going to see World's Best Workforce, across the top. Each of these are World's Best Workforce measures. There's that only one that overlaps, graduation rate for World's Best Workforce and ESSA, and then you can see the ESSA measures on the second row.
And this one is specifically each school, how each school lays out their own school improvement plan. So first thing we saw was kind of the federal and state. Then we talked about kind of district-wide, how we're going to lay it out. And then now this is actually like at the school level.
Okay, and so in this case, schools are asked to review their data, kind of do a needs assessment, and then decide where you're setting your goal. And we've asked them in this, why did you pick this? What did your analysis show? And then what actually is your SMART goal? And that's down here.
But there's 10 boxes, 10 goals. Which does that apply to?
So you'll see the check boxes, check marks in each of these four.
Yeah.
So they're saying my SMART goal aligns to World's Best Workforce in a couple of ways and ESSA in a couple of ways.
So can the school just say, we're not going to focus on the other six?
Well, I don't think that's not what they say. We're not going to do that. But what they say is, this is going to be our focus area, this goal.
Okay.
So for instance, in this case, most of our elementary schools have already hit the ESSA mark for consistent attendance. Usually becomes an issue in the secondary, okay? So they still care a lot about attendance, but their focus is really on where their needs assessment drove them based on looking at their data, where they were weakest, okay?
And it also allows you to really push forward, because if you try to focus on too many things, you end up focusing on nothing. So an example is Red Oak. Last year, Mitch and Tony, the instructional coach there, decided let's really go after literacy this year. And they put together a great plan, implemented it really well with professional development, and that was the drive. And everybody in the school knew we are trying to improve our reading scores. And reading scores went up a lot, went up by about 10%, which is substantial. It's very significant because of all those strategies that they put in place. If last year we would have tried to focus on everything, we would not have made those gains in reading. Now, we're continuing the same practice with reading, but now the focus is on math this year, but we're still continuing those great practices that were learned by focusing in on that.
And that's great work at Red Oak to overcome their dean that they had last year.
bad.
Still have that level of
Still,
performance.
some remnants there.
I know my poor kid had to go there.
Dave,
I apologize.
I still want to peel the end back a little bit on this because I'm a believer in you can do anything, you can't do everything. So I buy that. But at the same time, we could theoretically have a situation where all of our schools, at least where they apply across all the schools, nobody happens to focus on that one for whatever reason. And so it just gets left behind. What oversight is this at the district level, the administration level, kind of saying, okay, we're seeing everybody's plans before they're signed off on, before everybody starts. We got to make sure that we're checking enough of the boxes, if you will. How are we doing that?
Sure. Let me answer that not a couple ways here. One, so when you look at this one that says school readiness, right? That's really, it could be our early childhood center, probably not our secondary school. So you're never going to see this one.
Some don't apply to all levels.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's one piece. The second piece is, I think, the way Ford just described it, when they did their quote-unquote needs assessment at Red Oak, that's where they saw their greatest need was and the focus was. So you may have a year where across the district, our data is saying this is what we need to go after. So as we work together, that kind of oversight that you're saying, if the data is indicating that's where the need is, that's what we should be going after. If we find that our data is showing that this one's the one and nobody's doing it, that's a problem, right?
Okay, so basically the data is going to be the puppet master here.
It should be. It should be telling us where we'll say our greatest opportunity is.
And that's the data retreat that happens every summer in August. And that's where Dave's always pulled great data. Dave and Katie have always pulled really great data and gotten it together for the schools so that each school can look at it as a building leadership team. All right, what are we going to focus on this year based on that data? So they're making really good decisions based on those things.
Okay. And just one other tie that we'll make, and I think you guys have a screenshot of this. You've seen we kind of overlaid our 6 pillars there. And we tried to do a crosswalk between the ESSA and World's Best Workforce Indicators and our 6 pillars. So you'll see in grade 3 reading, we thought that kind of aligned with quality instruction and those little pink bars on there.
Yeah.
And so you could argue about which ones they are and where, but this was our best stab at it.
That's good.
So we're trying to take these, what appear to be sometimes different worlds out there and connect them in one. And here's one other way to look at that. So if you looked at this slide, you'll see what in this case is sitting on top is the World's Best Workforce and ESSA, that then we are displaying in that dashboard piece right here, and it's still kind of something we're working on, which then kind of using this data drives where we decide we're going to set our improvement goals in each school. Okay, so you're kind of seeing this aligned piece, right? And I'm going to jump to something else here and just show you what we're also working on. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know in talking to you're looking at that dashboard as being a relatively quick reference and an overview, and there's certainly other more detailed data like, the report card on MDE and internal data and benchmarks and
more trend data as well.
And how we compare to the state, a lot of different.
It's kind of a quick stop overview, a lot of categories.
Yep. And so we are playing with that. I'll show you that. And this is where Ford and I are kind of working together on this too. So we started, I gave you a lousy copy of this, kind of the inspiration here. But you notice it's really simple. Somebody can pick this up and grab it, and there's one number, and I have something I can do. We started trying to do that for us and said, well, I don't like that. And maybe it was me. I'm a data guy, and I can sift through all of it. So I wanted to see Shakopee's and the states, and maybe I wanted the actual number or the comparison number. And so all of a sudden, we start to lose the simplicity of this by plugging in more of like that. So just so you know, what to Mike's point, we're looking at for one thing that is just a quick, I can get it at a glance, knowing that a lot of detail lives behind this that we will provide, like Fort said, for our schools to do this. to do this work. So we're playing with it. And
When do we stop playing with it and say, you know, perfection, don't let perfection be the enemy of good? When's it good enough and we gotta go live with it?
Good question.
I mean, I liked it when you showed us this before. This is before these guys were here.
Yeah.
And it was like, this is a great tool. It seemed like we saw a version of this before, and I liked it then. I'm giving you both credit as well as saying at some point we just kind of have to fish cut bait. You know, yeah. And it's good. It's really a great tool. I wouldn't overthink it, I guess is my point. At some point you have to start, and then, yeah, we refine it. We learn a little bit next year and it tweaks, but this is good stuff. Really good stuff. You guys deserve credit for that.
That's all we wanted to share. We will finish baking and we'll quit thinking.
Well, my point is, at some point we have to say, here it is, here's what we measured today, and here's how often we're going to come back and give you an update to see have we moved the needle. So,
perfect.
You know, we got to stop baking as you or stop mixing ingredients and start baking.
Yep.
And this information is going to be available to anybody when this goes live?
Yep.
Teachers can have it, parents can have it, community members?
So what we think we might do, and this is us thinking about the best way to give this to our buildings is, this is the district, right? It's the snapshot band that maybe we can create behind this. Each building has one, and they see their snapshot, and they use that kind of as their initial, where's our biggest opportunity? And then I need to dig in further behind that and see what the details are. So it would kind of all be consistent and aligned is what we're trying to get to. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Great work.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks for having me.
Did you bring treats for the class?
I should have.
Next time, what the food allergy.
That's right. All right, let's bring it on home. We'll do a quick round robin, but I'm going to take chair's prerogative. I'm going to start and recognize someone who will not be in the room anymore. And that is Amanda. She's, and I'm not on social media, so I had people tell me this. So that's how I know. But is moving on to another career opportunity for her. And we're happy for you and hope that that proves to be very successful. And Lord knows it's not been an uneventful time in your career here, but we wish you the best and thank you for sharing news on the district. And if you care to say anything, normally we don't call on you, but if you care to say anything, you certainly
if I talk, I'll cry. I said I'd probably cry a lot the next couple weeks. It's been a wild ride, and hopefully the district and the newspaper are both better for it. And be nice to the new person. No shenanigans in the first year. But thank you for everything. It's been awesome telling everybody's stories, especially stuff like, Melissa's on and all that stuff that will really stick with me forever.
Well, thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
All right, I think I went right last time, I'm going to go left this time. Angela.
Got nothing other than good luck to the girls in state.
Yes, absolutely. Lots of votes. Thank you for having Matt.
Well, good luck to the girls at state. Also, we had a personnel committee meeting tonight. Some good discussions of our upcoming negotiations, some staffing discussions, more to bring back as formal recommendations for future board meetings.
Thank you very much.
A couple things, the Communications Advisory Citizens Committee, whatever the official name is for it. It's a mouthful.
You got the words right. It's the order.
Citizens Communications Advisory.
Thank you. We met tonight and had some good discussion around the first draft of a communication plan for the district. There was quite a bit of good feedback. So Ashley and Crystal are going to take it back and do some work on it and revisit it. And yeah, it was awesome to be at the game on Friday night. Good luck to the girls on Wednesday. It was amazing to see all the students that were there. I know Eden Prairie had a lot going on that night with hockey and boys basketball, but we definitely had favor of who was in the gym. The band sounded awesome, so kudos to everybody. It was a great atmosphere. So.
Ash?
Good luck to the girls at stake.
Sarah?
Well, I'm going to mention something that you spoke of earlier. The
boys high school volleyball league season started today. First day of practice across the state. Just a piece of information for you, there's 50 school districts across the state that are participating, 91 teams, which is awesome. It's the second year now, as you know, of the volleyball league. Competition begins in less than a month, and Shakopee is actually hosting the first state tournament in May. So I'll get you those dates. So it's exciting stuff.
Dave?
I have nothing else.
Okay. Ford, anything else you care to add, just since you're here?
Congratulations to wrestling.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
what I was going to say. Yeah.
We'll be recognizing a number of groups here to come.
Swimming?
Councilwoman Contreras.
Say it again, sorry.
Okay. Paul?
Just to echo, congratulations to all of our teams doing such a great job representing us at state. And that's about all I have for right now.
Perfect. Joe?
Everybody said what I would have said.
Ditto.
That works. I have nothing else to add. Mike, bring us on home.
Not much, other than one of the things I've enjoyed, and it ties into the girls' basketball team and wrestling and all the other activities. It's really neat for me, being newer, just to see how the community and our students rally around their peers, the other athletes, the other performers. I think it's fantastic, and so I'm sure we'll see that this week, Wednesday at Williams Arena again, and obviously looking forward to watching these Sabres girls basketball team.
And tomorrow is the rescheduled ACT, so if you have kids at the high school, you probably have a weird schedule going.
Okay.
And the boys basketball plays tomorrow night.
At Prior Lake.
Semifinals, right?
Yep, it's a makeup. The game was originally scheduled Saturday, moved to Prior Lake, so.
It's 5:30.
That's a great
I
question.
think
That
it's
sounds
5:30.
right.
I think it's
So,
5:30.
yeah, good luck to the boys basketball team as well.
All right, speaking of upcoming things, let's just review the calendar. Had personal committee meeting tonight. We have our retreat on Saturday. Don't forget that. Finance committee meeting will precede our business meeting on March 25th, and facilities will meet again that week, March 27th. With that, I will take a motion to adjourn tonight's work session. Thank you, Paul. Second. Kristen, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we are adjourned.